Welcome to the International College of Dentists Chronicles of Outstanding Leaders in Dentistry. This interview is with Dame Margaret Seward, the immediate past Chief Dental Officer for England and the first in so many positions. Dame Margaret, a specialist in oral surgery, has held the position of President or Director of many organizations and initiatives. She's been the president of such organizations as the British Dental Association, the first woman in 47 years and the second in the history of the association. She's been president of the General Dental Council, the first woman elected to this council, president of the Royal Society of Medicine, the section of odontology, president of the London Hospital Dental Club, and the British Association for the Study of Community Dentistry, of which she's a founding member. She also was the first woman Vice Dean of the Royal College of Surgeons of England and served as the editor of the British Dental Journal for 13 years. During this interview, we're going to learn of the many other activities she has had and of her vision for the future of dentistry. In 1994, she received the civil honor as Commander of the British Empire. And in 1999, she was honored as the Dame Commander of the British Empire. Welcome, Dame Margaret.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to having some conversations with you about various activities, as you've said, and my vision for the future.
I am looking forward to it as well. And so one way for us to get started today is to start at the beginning and to ask you to tell us a little bit about how it was growing up.
Well, it was very interesting for me because my father was a general dental practitioner, and we had the dental practice within the house where we lived. And so I grew up seeing patients come, talking to patients, noticing that my father was well respected within the community. He was loved because he made them better. He got them out of pain and made them look good. And I thought, oh, this is very interesting. This is what I want to be. I never really thought of doing anything else except dentistry. But the other thing that I found about growing up in such a household was that there was at that time a technician, there was laboratories, and I was able to go and make model aircraft, go and fly airplanes, absolutely. And people used to say, why are you doing that? You're a girl, you should be playing with dolls, and here's a doll's pram. But to me, it was much more interesting working with my hands, and so I had that early sort of initiation, if you like.
And exposure.
Yeah.
Now, did you help him with the patients? Do you assist him in some of the procedures?
Well, no, I was still quite small then. At my early, when I was a youngster, I used to more open the door and greet the patients. And I'm told that I used to say to them, because the surgery was upstairs, would you like a ticket to go up the stairs? Like selling them a bus ticket, you know.
That's right.
But it was nice because they talked to you, and then you saw them afterwards, and obviously they had and benefited by the treatment that was given, and there was a lovely atmosphere. And so, yes, I began to talk to them, but also my friends who came to play often used to say, what was that funny smell in your house? And of course it was the usual and the various other medicaments that we now only know too well. And I had not noticed, and it had no effect on me.
So it was not unusual for you as a woman to consider going into the profession of dentistry, because your father sort of opened that door for you.
Correct.
And you saw it as the opportunity. Well, you attended the London Hospital Medical College of Dental School. Did you think of any other career options at that time as you entered that, and what was it like being a woman in dental school?
Well, the other career option, my father was very forward-sighted, and he said, make sure you want to do dentistry. Would you like to do medicine? And I said, oh no, I want to do what I see you doing. And so I never really at that stage considered another career, and my sights were on to do dentistry. Yes, it was strange to be doing it as a woman in those days, and certainly at school when I said I'm going to take my science subjects to enter dental school. What, a woman doing dentistry? Oh, ugh, how horrible, going into the mouth, That's not quite nice for a woman. And so, yes, there was that. But of course, to me, gave me almost more encouragement, because I thought, well, I'm going to do that then. If I'm, why have they got this feeling it's not a good career? I believe I'd like to test it and try it and see and help people. And it was the practical part, that using the hands, that very much attracted me to it. So I went for it.
Well, you went for it, but you really went for it because you moved into a male-dominated specialty, oral surgery. What made you turn that track?
Well,
because it was a medicine track.
It was
what
indeed.
Your father had suggested.
Indeed. The reason I did that was because I was very fortunate to, after I qualified, to get the one only resident house job at the London Hospital, which meant that you were actually living in for 6 months, and it was your responsibility to see all the emergencies, so that was road accidents and all the patients who came in for operation,
so you were
and
on
look after them.
Full-time emergency
Yes.
call for 6 months?
Oh, well, you had an occasional weekend because sometimes the men would be very pleased to step in and deputise for you because they wanted to be there if they were, attending a rugger match, for example. So they gave you a weekend off. And when I went home, my parents used to say, well, you come home for the weekend, but you sleep the whole time because you were so exhausted. But it was great experience. And of course, this is what nowadays is lacking, because we have working time directives, we have to work certain limited amount of time, and the exposure that we benefited from by being on call for all those hours with very small breaks, and when you say for 6 months, obviously you had weekends and an odd week's holiday, did really build up your experience. And so I got very into enjoying the hospital atmosphere, the hospital dentistry, and therefore I started off on the oral surgery track. And I said to my father, I'm sorry, I'm not coming back and working in your dental practice. And so when he knew that, he said, that's fine, and then he retired.
Well, but he was, I'm sure, very proud of you for taking that direction.
Well, I mean, he understood, and he could see that that's how it was developing. So yes, and then, of course, I realised that I would need medicine. But that's, that I went as far as I could without, and I thoroughly
that
enjoyed
is
it.
Obviously a very complementary specialty. It could have been a specialty of medicine or dentistry, oral surgery.
Indeed.
Well, looking back at that early developmental phase of your career, were there any other things you would have done differently?
No, certainly not. No, I have no regrets, because, of course, that early stage was how I met my husband, Gordon. He was senior registrar at the London Hospital. And it's like in the movies, the houseman falls in love, or as it was really, the senior registrar started to show attention to this resident dental house officer who was a woman. And so we used to operate together, and then we socialised together, and then, well, there was the wedding bells,
Well, that sounds like a very perfect partnership that happens from profession all the way through family.
Yeah.
I reviewed your career pathway. I was very impressed at the breadth of activities that you have gotten yourself into. And I noticed so many unusual tracks. So as you just mentioned, you started your career more traditionally, you know, as a resident dental house surgeon at the London Hospital in Whitechapel, and evolved into the registrar in oral surgery and dental officer to the nursing staff in that same hospital. But then within a very short time, your appointments emerged into various research fellowships, lectureships, community dental officer roles, and editor roles. And then since the 1980s, you have had a breadth of activities in organizations and in initiatives and reports. How did you decide to take so many turns in the road, deviating from a more traditional path?
Opportunity. There was no great plan in my career. I didn't sit down and say, I'm going to do this, X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going here, there, and everywhere. Remember, as you said at the beginning, Dushanka, I was a woman in a man's world very much at the beginning, and eventually, as you heard, married Gordon, had children. And what do? In the late 60s, 70s, you had to have a break. It was very uncommon for women to carry on working. And so I had time out.
The children.
Correct. There wasn't around the creche, the childcare facilities. If you didn't take time out, you were almost regarded as a loose woman. But I would never, and never did, and never have, and never will regret having time out, because it's very precious. And time does go very quickly. I had 5 years.
5 years, that's what I thought.
Yes.
So the children, how close are your children? You have a boy and a girl?
Yes, 2 years between them. It was well planned, wasn't it?
Very close.
Very clever.
That's
yeah,
right.
very clever. One of each, so we could
balance.
stop after 2, and 2 years between. And yes, so I didn't go back to doing any dentistry until after our youngest was at primary school. So that was the eldest, I beg your pardon, eldest was at primary school at 5, and the boy was 3, but he was going to, like, we had nursery schools. But I only went back and did a couple of sessions, but that was in the community. And it brought home to me very much that there was no other way to get back in.
No.
When I stopped working to have the children, I was running my own dental unit. We were operating 2-3 times a week. We had reference service for all the dentists in the area where, as it was at that time, we lived. And a consultant at a nearby hospital said, you know, if you give up, you'll never step back on that ladder. And that is very true, because people will pass you by as you're out for 5 years on the ladder. So younger people will come up, as it's still a male-dominated profession, and it will be difficult to step back on exactly where you came off, which is answering your question, right, in a way, as to why I've changed. Because it became very obvious that A, I'd have to get medicine, and B, that I couldn't go back and run the unit, which I had been running, because obviously somebody else was there running it now. And therefore, I looked around to do other things. And when I went back and I did some sessions, I worked in the community service, and that sort of started my interest in children's dentistry, and a lot rolled out from there, because I was aware that I was having to retrain myself, because there were no schemes, there were no opportunities, there were no getting back to practice courses.
Yeah, this is actually a very interesting thing. We're just dealing with this issue of re-entering into careers, whether they're into practice careers or into research, for example, and the training that needs to go along with it. I know that you had said earlier that there were such schemes for medicine, but not in dentistry.
That's right.
So you sort of took it on upon yourself
Yes.
to make those pathways available for women that followed. Could you tell me a little bit about
Well,
what
yes.
you explored
I mean,
there?
I suppose I always had this slight indignation that why should women doctors, as it was then called, a women doctors retainer scheme, why should they have it and dentists don't, And I felt this was not fair, if you like. It was no use just sitting down and saying something's not fair or the world's against me or, and moan and groan. You've got to get on and do something about it. So that's what I did, and I persuaded the then Chief Dental Officer at the Department of Health that I would like to do a study, and that was 1975, to look at the contribution of women to dentistry in England and Wales, and to see how they all coped with trying to get back into practice. Right. And it was very illuminating, and it showed how many had to do as I'd done, sort of try on patients. That's no good. You need a proper support.
Formal setting.
Correct. And there were a lot of interesting other side issues that came out of that study, which the Department of Health supported. But the main one, of course, was that they agreed that there should be a similar scheme for the dentists as there was for doctors. And so it was introduced. So that was a good baseline, and it also showed how many women were not returning to practice, and that was a great loss.
Well, this is, I know that in terms of what the percentage of women in dentistry in the United States is, it's about 34%. In the UK, or specifically in England, what proportion of the practitioners are women now?
Oh, and now,
yes.
50% of women are in the dental schools qualifying each year,
yeah.
50%.
But when you started?
But when I started, we were way down at about, for example, in my year, there were 3. In the whole of the dental school, which encompasses 5 years worth,
wow, in the whole
students,
school, yes.
There were only 20 women out of, well, it was about 89 people. There were very, very few women
right.
in dentistry, but it varied. The year below me had no women,
right.
and the year above me had 1 woman. So they were just beginning to appear as a rarity, a novelty, and we were almost treated as such. But now, 50% of most of the intake in dental school are women.
And so this issue of being able to re-enter, to leave for a while and come back now is a seamless process that's now in place that women can follow as well as men in some cases, because men are dropping out as well.
It is meant to be seamless.
Yes.
It's not always thus, and of course there is the balance between the family life and the professional life,
right.
and the getting higher qualifications now, but there is certainly schemes, and just last April our health minister relaunched a new KIT scheme, that's Keeping in Touch scheme, and Getting Back to Practice scheme, and made financial allowances, and we set up through again a report I had done, a network of retraining and returning advisors who will be around, well, they are now operating from last April in each of the regions, 12 of the regions.
And they play like a mentor role?
Correct.
And a coach?
Correct.
So that
and
as
then
they
help
go
them
through,
to get back into
yes.
the practice, or, you know, to deal with any of the problems that arise.
It's a very, very important process because, as we see here, there are many positions that are going vacant that would benefit
Yes.
from having the expertise of someone well-trained in dentistry if there were tracks to bring
Yes.
people back in. As I said earlier, you've been the first in so many areas, in education, in professional organizations, in scholarly work, such as the British Dental Journal, in civic affairs, and in pushing the envelope for women in dentistry. I want you to tell me a little bit about these first. Which were the most challenging and which were some of the most enjoyable?
Well, of course, I was lucky, wasn't it, that there were to be firsts.
Right.
Now, the poor women don't have that option. So I often feel a bit guilty sometimes. Say, oh, you did this first, you did that first.
Yeah.
What do the poor women can do now? But challenging, one of them, which was particularly, I think, made me realise how unusual we still were in the profession at the early and sort of middle 70s, 1976, I'm talking about 1978, that sort of era, was I was, as you say, the first woman to be elected by all my peers onto the Faculty of Dental Surgery, which is a board of the Royal College of Surgeons. And I arrived, and there were these 15 other men on this board. And when you have the meetings, after the meetings, there's usually a dinner in the evening.
A nice social event.
Oh, absolutely. After having shouted at each other all day.
They need some
They
kind
need
of
some, yeah. So in the evening they have a nice dinner in the Royal College with all the trappings around of, you know, their beautiful buildings, like many of the buildings you have here. And so it's a very relaxed atmosphere. And they can bring along a guest. And the guest has to be one of their colleagues, and obviously that was always a man. And I said, please, can I bring a colleague, but can I bring a lady? You know, one of my sort of co-workers and so on. Oh no, it must be a man. This is how it is. It's, yeah. So by the time I had brought 3 men, I brought my brother, and then I brought my a sort of cousin, and then I brought another friend who I knew from the British Dental Association. I thought I was running out of men. And remember, it was incredibly difficult because my husband was also on this board. So I had to be a bit careful which men I brought, that they passed muster with my husband. So after I had sort of played the old boys' rules for 3 times, I reintroduced this as an item on the agenda at one of these board meetings during the day and said, do you think you could now relax the rules and allow me to bring a woman? There was a big debate. I was amazed. I was horrified. And some very outspoken people. And I only just got it through that I could then bring a woman.
Did they have a secret vote?
Well, actually, no. So I knew who it was.
Well,
they had to put up
there, right.
Yeah. And so I brought a woman. Imagine, only 2 or 3 dinners later, all the men were bringing women as well. So I learnt from that if you find that something is very much built into what you don't like, what you don't think is logical,
right,
which it wasn't, don't moan and groan and go all uppity about it. Just work away gently and then bide your time and get in there and you can change things.
Well, I think that we won't be all uppity about things. I want to go right into your role that you just completed, 2 years as the Chief Dental Officer for England. And I know that there are many challenges in playing that role as you advise the Minister of Health. Could you tell me about some of those?
Yes, indeed. It's been a very challenging
You just finished a few weeks ago.
Yes, I think, what are we now? The 18th of October?
That's right.
That's 18 days I've had
away.
Well, you've kept me busy.
And you were brought out of retirement to take this role.
I was indeed.
Yes,
I was enjoying myself. The story goes, and it's now in folk legend. I was retired after being president of the General Dental Council, which I had 5 years, and I had all intentions of being retired, and I was phoned up and asked to come back to deliver the oral health strategy, yes, which was part of the new NHS plan of modernising dentistry. And of course I was very flattered to be asked to come back and deliver something, and I was worried as to my background. I wasn't a civil servant, you know well about it, but I wasn't brought up in the civil service ways, advising ministers and knowing exactly the rules and ropes and so on. But the story that now in legend is that I say, well, there was I in retirement enjoying Bournemouth, which is a big lovely seaside town on the south coast in England with the New Forest behind, beautiful scenery, and there was I in my retirement job selling ice cream on the beach. Yes, I was.
No, you were.
And I was doing, you know the Mr. Whippy, you do this round and then putting in the flake, and I was really getting it so expert, and I was getting all my, you know, brownie points for it. And I said, now you've brought me back to do that. And this has been the folklore now, because that's how I said it, because it was a very extraordinary thing. I never expected to come back to do it.
To be tapped on the shoulder and then to be brought in again.
That's right.
Well, I had a chance to look at the report that you worked so hard on.
Yeah.
And for those of us that aren't from England, the NHS is the National Health Service. And the report's called Options for Change. And you directed this modernization of dentistry within this National Health Service. That must have been an incredible process, because the service has been viewed from all of us abroad as a model. And individuals within that service have probably practiced a certain way for many, many years. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you modernized in this report some of the future directions for the NHS?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, that's a big question. How long did you say we had?
That's right.
Yes. Well, the thing is that you've put your finger on it. It's some big service, been running, delivering dental care for over, 1945. We're well over 55 years ago, you see. It's a long time. And it was time. It was beginning to be even past just tinkering round the edges. It needed some radical changes and modernisation. And we were concerned to put the patient first, the patient at the centre, and focus on the patient and make sure that they got more information about what was on offer, make sure the morale of the profession was improved. And in fact, there was a great culture change, bearing in mind that dentistry now is much more preventive. Right. And not so much on the repair and that side, extraction and so on. But how did one start on this culture change? Well, firstly, was to engage the profession again, because they had been disengaged in any developments or discussions. They had been shut out by the department.
So the department organized and manages the National Health Service.
Correct.
But the British Dental Association, for example, was not involved in the development or oversight.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and you had come off as being the past president of the British Dental Association.
Yes.
So you were natural to make that bridge.
Well, they trusted me.
Right.
That I was going to obviously not sell them down the river, if you like to put it in that way, and listen, and also engage them in the debates and say to them, stop moaning, using again back to my same sort of, stop moaning, yes. Yeah. Here is your big opportunity. I went out and I did lots of road shows. I talked to them up and down the country, the profession, and said, this is Last Chance Saloon. You are all moaning and groaning, and this is bad and that's bad. Here is your opportunity to become engaged with us in government, the Minister of Health, the Secretary of State, and the Prime Minister himself was behind us doing something about modernising dentistry. Here, I said, is your chance to have ownership. Yes. And that is key to whatever you do. You can never change something that's so fundamental unless there is real dialogue and a feeling by the stakeholders that they've had an input. Right. And when I mentioned the Prime Minister, it was very unique that the Prime Minister had taken interest and had promised in a speech in October 2000, he said, everybody will have access to an NHS dentist by virtue of a telephone call by September 2001. And so that was, in a way,
that was a challenge.
And there was many a meeting that I was at with some of the very top team in the Department of Health, where I said, now, if you don't let me deliver this challenge, that the Prime Minister, which was called the Prime Minister's Pledge, I am going to be put on a boat and sent down the River Thames to the Tower. So you've got to help me. And that did encourage people to realise, and we did a lot of strategic work, and we brought people in to help us make it possible using what is called the NHS Direct, which is a telephone call system where anybody, you could call and say, I need dental treatment.
I'm going to call after we finish our
discussion
discussion here.
454648. But you'll have to pay to phone
pay long distance.
And it works. Yeah. And there were certain requirements. It was so much distance from where you were. If you were in a town, you had to have so many miles away, or time for an emergency as opposed to urgent to routine.
That's an extreme comfort zone for everybody in the country, very good. For a national service to be able to reach out like that.
Absolutely.
There were several critical parts that you changed and highlighted. There were a lot of things that were changed, but the centerpiece, as you said, was patient-centered care. Yeah. But you also looked at changing some of the frequency of services that had in the past been delivered. Yeah. And could you say a little bit about that?
Yes, well, there has always been this tradition that every 6 months you should go to the dentist for a checkup, an examination. And unfortunately, that has been tied to the way dentists are paid or remunerated, and not tied to what is actually needed. And today there is no indication, there's no evidence. We talk about evidence-based dentistry, and we have no evidence that it is right to go every 6 months. It may be right to go every 12 months. It may be right to go every 18 months.
Or every 3 months for some people, that's right.
So crucial and central to, as you're saying, setting up the new way forward in options for change, we have introduced there's a systematic review going on looking at the recall interval, and then we will have proper guidance so dentists know what they can do. But tied in to developing, and I think it's important to say, in developing options for change, it was very much bringing in as many people from the outside in the profession and the consumer organisations, well represented, to know what patients really wanted, was having meetings, workshops, retreats, any mechanism that there was a great input, so that in the end, when that document has been published, which it was on August the 6th this year, it is very much belongs to the BDA, the other organisations, the Royal Colleges, as well, of course,
they witnessed it. But let me use that as an example. I wanted to ask you about your leadership style. And I think that this provides one of many examples of how you probably have addressed other issues. I want to turn to the British Dental Journal that you edited for 13 years. And I was so impressed with the many, many different things that you catalyzed as editor that went above and beyond the journal itself, such as the various tours and the educational complement. Yes, I would like to. Tell me a little bit about your leadership style.
Well, my leadership style, I've never sat down and said, I'm going to lead like this. I don't read all these books that are around us now, and there are many books written and so on and stuff. It is something that develops, that you find that you are successful with, and that people will engage with you. My leadership style has been very much team working. It's been my motto throughout everything I've done. No one can do anything on their own. And I was embarrassed a little bit, and I still am a little bit surprised when I hear all these awards, when you read out that I've got. You couldn't do that on your own. There's no I. It's we. And people, leadership is to do with people. And it's engaging all the people around you, but bringing them along, empowering them through delegation. And not a dictatorial way at all, but showing through your own energy, your own commitment, and having a passion for what you want to do. You have to have very clearly for those who you're leading.
Yes.
And I don't like to think I've got lots of followers. I like to think I'm more sort of people surrounding.
Yeah.
Correct. That you've got to be able to articulate the vision of where you want to go. So in relation to the BDJ, for example, once we had got it back into making a profit, or I think they always call it a surplus, you know, but they don't like, any national association likes to
use the word profit.
Profit, yeah. I look round to try to do other things to increase the visibility of the British Dental Journal around the world, and also to spread the very important word that was in it, which was scientific research. Now, it was very clear that these study tours had a strong educational component, because we went to countries which did not have the benefit of sophisticated dental services. So we went to China, and we learnt and did a transfer exchange. We took information, we took materials, we took dentists who could share, and it was a very very encouraging experience, but for all people who went, not just for people who we visited.
Right. Not the ones that you had provided information. They provided you with insights, probably, of how to do things differently.
Yes. But it was a nice social occasion as well. We made lots of friends, but you know, there was a serious...
I'm a firm believer that the social environment really helps the work get done many times. But you still have received many honors and awards. And I know that of the many honors, there are some that probably stand out. Could you tell me which are those, and why do they stand out, for example?
Well, I suppose the first are the professional awards, and my first professional award was my doctorate in dental science from the Newcastle, and that meant that I was a proper doctor then. My husband is a doctor because he's medically and dentally qualified as an oral maxillofacial surgeon, and my son and daughter had been to Cambridge, and they had got their PhDs and DPhils, and there was poor mum. She was still an ordinary missus, you see. So I felt very proud to be a doctor at long last, and the postman felt it was much easier then. We were all doctors in the household together. But it gave me a great thrill to think that I was being honoured by a university of the stature of Newcastle. And then I mean, I've been very fortunate to get more honours, and I don't mean to say that glibly. It is, each university, it is very important to them and to the profession,
to the process as well.
The last one was in Sheffield just this July, the University of Sheffield, where I had a DSc. And it was to the whole medical, dental and veterinary faculty seen as something for the dental profession to be proud of. So it's not me just personally, it is the profession.
It's a reflection.
That is correct. And that's one thing, if I can just flip back so I don't forget, the achievement at the department as CDO was dentistry was a very low ebb within the Department of Health. And nobody bothered about it. They all thought medicine, they talk about doctors and nurses, doctors and nurses, doctors and nurses, as though they're the only healthcare professionals. And because I just did the careful beavering away and just sat quietly and then would say, "Oh, what about the dentist? You know, remember we all get toothache. You've had toothache?" And there's a minister or the Secretary of State. Of course they have toothache from time to time. And gradually the dental perception went up in the Department of Health, and it went high up the agenda. And when I retired just 18 days ago, when I left, the permanent secretary, when he was saying, you know, a few nice words, he said, "We shall never now forget dentistry." And that, to me, is the greatest achievement.
That is the bottom line. And I think that you are right in how you introduce it, when you introduce it, and also by being present all the time.
You ask about those honours. If I go back now and just finish off with... it's certainly a great feeling of satisfaction when you're honoured by another discipline.
Right.
And when I got the award from the Royal College of Anaesthetists, of their fellowship of their Royal College, and that was for when I was at the General Dental Council as president, pushing through the very important legislation which we had to encourage dentists. In fact, not only encourage, but we actually said dentists could no longer do general anaesthetic in dental practice, which was to safeguard patient safety because we were having deaths, and that is just not acceptable. And this was obviously something that the anaesthetists were extremely pleased. The other thing, of course, is to be recognised internationally, and I'm proud to be a fellow of the International College of Dentists.
We're all proud of that.
And the European section, and I edited there. You see, my British Dental Journal skills were taken into editing the ICD digest, as I called it, and then, of course, the American Dental Association, the honorary membership there, and I'm just off to New Orleans after we've finished here.
And you'll be speaking on leadership there and in women in leadership, so that's very, very timely.
That's right.
But I have never met a dame before, and Dame Margaret, you are the first dame in dentistry. Could you tell me a little bit about that and everyone else? What it means, what it entails, and what the event was like.
Well, the event was
very special.
Very special. And of course, again, a professional in the glory of, you know, having a dame. And this was nice, yes, for the whole of dentistry, because it's not just, as again I say, just for one person. But it was a wonderful event. You go to the Buckingham Palace. You have a letter, first of all, which comes and says it is in the Prime Minister's mind that he will recommend to the Queen that you be awarded a Dame of the British.
So the Prime Minister makes the recommendation.
Yes, to the you know, to the Queen, and then the Queen will accept or not accept. But first, you have to say whether you would accept it. Well, of course you would accept. You're very excited, but you have to tick on this form that yes, I will, because of course there is never any. It would never be right that you should refuse once you get the official letter. Right. And therefore you are asked if you would accept it, if the recommendation. Right. And you have this letter and you have this form and you have to tick it, and then you post it back, and you are told that you will hear nothing else until it's announced, if it's accepted by the Queen, on New Year's Eve.
And it's announced openly. It's not personally announced.
No.
So you are watching and waiting.
You're the first down when the papers come on sale, I can tell you, in the morning, and you're looking
kidding.
at... No, I'm not
and
kidding.
On New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve, you're down there buying the first edition about 6 o'clock in the morning. When the paper shop opens, you're there, and they all say, "Why are you here so early?" You know. Today, of course, some people can see it on the net because it's published just after midnight in the what they call the Gazette, the London Gazette, which is put up on the web. And that is when you know for sure that you have got the award. And it's very interesting. This form, when you're ticking it, you go to post it, and then you think, well, did I actually get it in the post box? You know, and you go back to check it.
To make sure. Well, will Queen Elizabeth now call you up and say, "Dame Margaret, can you help me with my dental problems in the family.
Yes, no, she didn't. And people say when I was being invested by the Queen and she was putting on the crown, you have two little pins, and they have to. There's two hooks. And they have the big bow with the lovely medal which says for service for country, and it's got Queen Mary and the King Edward on there. And then she hooks on the star. And people say, what did she say to you? Do you know a good dentist round by Buckingham Palace? Of course she doesn't. She says some nice things to you. And it was a very important and a beautiful occasion. And then my husband and I, we stood outside afterwards holding the jewel, as it's called, in the box, and we had our photograph taken. But there's a very interesting point about that. This, you will see, is a lovely brooch and then a star. And the star has a pin on it, which is so thick it tears all your evening clothes, because that's when you can wear it, when you're dressed to go to dinners. Yeah. And the invitation says, you know.
I wish you had it on now.
Do you
so
really?
I could see it.
Decorations will be worn. I might not have got it through customs.
Okay.
Actually, because it's got this big pin and it's very sharp.
Metal, yeah.
And the thing is that, of course, here again, this star is designed for a man, because a knight of the Garter, he has this star, but it sits on his breast pocket on the suit, which is nice and thick and heavy. And they had never envisaged that women might get such an award. And so there's a little dames club, we call it informally a little dames club, where we keep trying to say to the Buckingham Palace, please, could you make it a little more feminine for us?
And make a little change. One of the questions I've always wanted to ask you is about your energy level and how you balance family and work. What drives you to be able to achieve all these things and also to just keep going?
A lot of people say that. In fact, again, when I left just the departments, they said, could I leave my energy tablets behind? But no, I don't take anything. I am very lucky. I think it's partly in the genes that you have good health, and I enjoy life. I'm very involved in the local church and the community. I play sports, but I enjoy swimming, and I always make time for that. And I do worry. Absolutely, the family is so important, and we always, wherever we are, we always have a family get-together for the Christmas, the New Year, the birthdays. We're very family orientated. We enjoy each other's successes and so on.
And your son and daughter did not follow in your husband's and your footsteps in their careers.
They are very bright and very sensibly. I think they were fed up hearing about dentistry over the breakfast table. No, we didn't talk dentistry all the time, but obviously it was inevitable that they knew what was going on. And while I was in my career break, I did a teething survey, because I thought it'd be nice to try to get a
sense of the early childhood oral health status.
And as I was in the middle of all my friends with having babies and so on, it seemed a good idea to set up a study. And so they had been used to things going on from a very early years as well. But they have done brilliantly, and they're very good at maths and physics, and my daughter read maths at Cambridge and then went on to Oxford. And then my son, similarly at Cambridge, did research at the Cavendish, and then he works in computers now. So, I mean, you know, there is so much.
Different areas as well.
And they try to make me computer literate. I promise that now I'm going to, you know, I've got time at retirement. My Christmas card will be computer generated and designed and all the rest of it. So I'm hoping they're going to give me a few lessons on.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
But I think it is important. You're talking about energy levels. I think people have got to pace themselves.
Now, one more question before we end. In terms of mentors, I know that your father was critical. Obviously, your husband as a colleague was very supportive. Any other mentors that come to mind?
Yes, I've been very fortunate to have very early on a tremendous mentor in Jerry Leatherman. Dr. Jerry Leatherman was one of the pioneers, as you know, in the FDI. Right. And he said to me, he said, Margaret, I will introduce you. I'll show you around. I'll make contacts for you, but then it's up to you. Yeah. And that's very good advice. And I think that you've got to always be positive. You know, the people I abhor more than anything is negative for people. You know, it's the people, the half empty and the half full. I always like that glass that's half full, not half empty. Let's be positive to the future. And he always encouraged me to do that. And I think the future of dentistry is safe in that way.
And what are the things you see in that future of dentistry?
I see much more team working.
Yeah.
I think we have been very slow to realise that there are many other people who can join that team and that we should delegate. We think we are, as dentists alone, should be sole in charge of one patient and their oral health. Today, as through my options for change, I was showing that there are new ways of delivery, oral health assessment, which means encouraging patients in lifestyle, smoking cessation, looking at how to really take part in their own oral health provisions.
And the health promotions.
And the health promotion. You don't need actually a dentist who's had 5, 6, 7 years university and postgraduate training. A dentist will be there to oversee, to lead forward, but you can encourage many other health professionals within what we call the skills escalator, multi-skilled working, to help deliver a much more rounded service for the future that fits the local needs. It's local solutions for local problems. And I think that there is a great future for dentistry as long as we try to embrace the wider team.
Well, this has been just a lovely time that we've had, and I really appreciate all the comments that you've made. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we close?
Well, I'd like to say, Dushanka, you've been very good. You've made it possible to have a good chat. I've enjoyed it. I can't believe that we've come to the end. But I think the International College deserves to be thanked as well, for this is obviously a programme that's very important, and I hope that they will keep making possible, because it is perhaps in the future people can look and see a common thread. I don't know. As I say, it's very difficult to analyse your own contributions, because one is only just fortunate to have had those opportunities. Right. I've mentioned perhaps as a woman, you know, I was lucky to be there in the right place at the right time. But I think if I was going to leave you with a thought, it's that you've got to be prepared to take risks.
Right.
And if you don't, you won't succeed.
Well, you're a wonderful role model. You've taken many risks, and I know that these different conversations will allow others to see role models for themselves. So thank you very much, Dame Margaret. It's a real honor to have had you with us.
Thank you.